All right. So I'm wondering if my microphone is actually picking anything up. All right. Not 100% sure as to whether or not that's the case. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. I didn't start with a fresh code base. I started with a sample that I did from a talk a while ago, a talk that I kind of borrowed from Jeff Huntley on lifting application state with reactive UI. So some of this code is going to look somewhat foreign to you if you're not a reactive UI person. I understand that, and I hope it doesn't take away from the point of the matter today, which is kind of talking about unit testing in Xamarin.Forms. So the long and short is I've been hearing a lot lately around UI testing in Xamarin. And if you're like me and you've come from a web background and you ever done any type of like Selenium testing or any type of web testing, you'll know that UI testing is relatively expensive. And the reality that UI testing is expensive is not from a hard dollars perspective all the time. It also comes from the fact that UI happens further up the stack, kind of away from the developer, and is kind of out of the developer hands. The UI changes on a consistent basis. The UI is changing probably every month, week. So as a result, to me, UI tests are really not my favorite. As a developer, unit tests are much more preferable. Even integration tests are more preferable to me than UI tests. But unit tests are something that I as a developer can control. I as a developer have complete and total anonymity to break, fix, do as part of my development lifecycle, or opt out of. I know a lot of people don't like unit testing. That's fine. But I keep seeing all this around Xamarin UI testing, and no one is talking about just putting some good old-fashioned XUnit against your view models and testing your view models. So today I'm going to kind of go over how I approach that. I'm going to go through probably a couple of libraries that I use, where I found those libraries. I'll probably talk about other libraries that I used to use during that time as well. I'm going to try and get let's see if I can get, let's do media source. Hopefully that means my Logitech will go. Live. Okay, so For whatever reason, it seems like my video camera's not working tonight, and I don't feel like troubleshooting it, so we'll just go ahead and keep going down this path. Unfortunately, you don't get to see the expressions on my face when when stuff fails. So this is a contrived example. I'm really not a fan of contrived examples, but here we are with a contrived example nonetheless. Oh, there we go. Now you can see me. You can see all the junk behind me. All right. So let's go ahead and scale that in a little bit. Let's make that a little bit smaller. Yeah, that's better. All right. Off we go on another adventure. Go ahead and shrink me down a little bit and put me off in the bottom corner so you don't have to worry about me so much. You can kind of just clue in on the helplessness of my face at moments. Alright, so now that that's working, back to it. So this is a solution I did some time ago now, and it's basically just a simple login page. This is probably the simplest version of a login page that I've had, and what I think we're going to do is we're going to extend it a little bit. If it doesn't have it in there already, I don't know if it does. I'll have to look at the page, but let's go ahead and look at the repo real quick and just look at the login page. Right, so the login page is real simple. It's got 2 entries, and this is password last. I am smarter than a 5th grader. I created this nice tappable activity just so that I could get some read off of the activity when the activity is doing stuff, and a button. All of this is kind of bare bones XAML. I do it as bare bones as possible, and then what I do is wire up all my bindings using reactive UI. Using reactive UI bindings behind the scenes. And then I just have a basic view model, so I'm actually going to use this and pin this stuff. Pin the tab, do the things. Yes, this is Rider that I'm using. I've been using Rider full time for almost 3 years now, and I love it. It's so much so that at a certain point, we're in Visual Studio 2019, made me very upset. One random Friday night, I closed it and started using Rider on Windows, and used Rider on Windows for about 3 months. And I'll say that Rider on Windows is actually better than Rider on Mac, even though Rider on Mac is a better experience than Visual Studio Mac. So hopefully that answers your question. So yeah, so all of this stuff is relatively basic. I'm doing some RX magic in here, but pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. So we'll go ahead and start breaking up our wonderful solution into stuff. So we'll create a source folder because all source should go in a source folder. Maybe we'll break out the targets. Yeah, so we'll put the Xamarin source in there. And again, this is just kind of my way of doing things. I've been doing this way for a while, so if somebody gives me a reason to do it a better way, I'll gladly listen. Test, and then I'll add one more solution folder, and I'll call this one, what will I call this one? Targets. Alright, so my iOS and Android are just going to be targets that my application is going to go against. And now that I've got all that sectioned out, I can do a new project. In my happy writer world, I go to unit test projects. So, and I'll have to talk to the writer team about this, but before, XUnit was the default, and for some reason, somewhere along the way, NUnit became the default, and that's a big problem. But from a unit test perspective, and if you like have no unit test experience whatsoever, there's three main unit test frameworks, meaning that they'll run your tests and give you some level of assertion. And that's XUnit, NUnit, and MS Test. I want to say there may be more, but these are the three main ones that I know are supported on .NET Core. So that said, NUnit was probably the original one that I used years and years ago. I've used MS Test. And XUnit was created by the creator of NUnit. It was kind of like, hey, I learned some stuff when I did NUnit. Here goes XUnit. This is going to be way better. So XUnit is my unit test framework of choice. I saw a tweet recently. I can't remember who tweeted it, but they asked the question of when you start up a project and you have, technology decision rights over that project, which unit test framework do you pick? And 50% of the people picked XUnit. And the other two were split down the middle, but XUnit is kind of my place where I start. So I'll go ahead and create an XUnit test project, and we'll call this what? We'll call it login state.tests. Sometimes I fix it with like unit test. So like sometimes I'll do unit test here if I know I'm going to be doing integration tests. I'm not going to do integration tests, so I'm just going to dump it into this folder. .NET Core 3.1 should be fine. And everything should go. So we'll click start. All right, so again, I'll say that the NuGet package experience in GUI form is not good on any IDE that I've used. Visual Studio, Rider, neither one of them really have it right. Early days of .NET Core, when they were still using JSON, to do all of your configuration, you could configure your packages using JSON, and some level of IntelliSense was there, so it knew like if you gave it a package, what package version were there for that package. I appreciate the fact that the writer team has made that a thing in the current CS Proj format. So we'll just go ahead in here and just start editing because it's easier to add package references here and get what I want. If you haven't ever used it, Fluent Assertions is probably my favorite assertions library. It takes a more fluid approach, or a fluent API approach to your assertions. So instead of doing like assert.isTrue or assert.true, you would just give the variable name and say that it should be true. It's a little bit easier to read to me, and I like it a lot. There's another one that's out there that's called Shouldly. Shouldly is very good, but Fluid Assertions, I've just been using it longer, so I'm more comfortable with the API, or more comfortable with the docs, maybe, is probably a better answer. Next one is going to be NSubstitute. So when we talk about unit testing, we talk about, like, you hear the concept of fakes and mocks and all of these things. NSubstitute is my mocking framework of choice. I've used mock MOQ. I've used RhinoMocks. Trying to think of other ones that I may have used, or other ones that are out there. But NSubstitute is like to me it's the API is the way that I like the best. It just the way that I set up my mocks makes more sense using NSubstitute to me. So I use NSubstitute. So I've got NSubstitute, I've got Fluent Assertions, and I've got XUnit. I think those are the only ones that I need. So we'll go ahead and save it. We'll come down here to this thing and refresh. Technically, I can go to a terminal and just do. Let me see, where are we? Yeah, I should just do .NET restore, and .NET will restore all my things. Yay, .NET restored. So we'll do .NET build. One thing you'll notice, I am very much about the command line, and I'm sorry if that Pretzel Rocks is either A, too loud, or B, spamming the chat too much. I'll get that fixed sometime. I figured streaming was more important than making sure all the pieces work. Okay. That's a thing. React UI doesn't appear to be present in the namespace. that's fine. What are we doing? Target's found confirmed that the expression import declaration it explicitly blew up on the Android project, and the iOS project. But I just ran this on the simulator, so let's go ahead and see if we can execute it through the tools, through the tooling. Camera settings while I'm waiting and see if I can make this a little bit more to your liking. There we go. That should make it better. Okay, so I get an error. Oh, because that's right, because .NET Build won't execute it because .NET Core is fully cross-platform and cross, operating system compatible, but you got to use MS Build instead of .NET Build when you're running certain projects. So if we can figure that out, .NET, before we get to .NET 5, that might be, a good 3.2 thing to fix. Because someone asked me at a meetup, I was at the local Flutter meetup this week, and someone asked me that exact question, and I was kind of like, I was kind of stuck. So they asked me more or less what I felt .NET Core was good as a full-time Mac developer, like developing on a Mac. And I told them that it's really, it's better, but it's still not there. There's still certain things that don't work, i.e. MS Build, like you just saw, doesn't work. Okay, so maybe I can show my monitor, my emulator too. See if I can show the emulator. Let's see. How do I show video capture device? Okay, let's see. No, that's definitely not it. Cancel. Okay, so I don't know how best to display that. I guess I'd have to go back and display my desktop and supposed to display the emulator. But I guess the emulator is really not that important. Because really the majority of what we're going to be doing is in this test explorer and running these tests. So let's go ahead and jump into the noise. I think I'm actually going to add one more package, believe it or not. I'm going to add, and yes, I'm explicitly trying to alphabetize my dependencies. Reactive UI.testing version. I think I have 9.x for the version. So let's see if we can. I actually may just kill Pretzel Rocks altogether because I don't know how much value it's adding, but I'm sure somebody will tell me later, hey, that was horrible. I couldn't hear you over the sound of the music. Alright, so just over here messing around with stuff on this computer. As you can tell, I'm still learning how to do the whole live streaming thing. Alright, so unit tests are your friend. So kind of my point was that everyone's talking about UI testing, and Xamarin.Forms is a UI framework that has a binding engine. So as a result of that binding engine, one of the things that we generally want to do is test the things that we can test in unit testing, and test the things that and like leave the things that aren't our dependencies out. So I don't have to test the binding engine, which is I think what the Xamarin UI framework is doing. I know that's what the Flutter UI framework is doing. Is actually testing what the rendering of the screen is and whether or not the property that's rendered has the correct value. But why do I need to test Xamarin's binding engine for them? I feel like if Xamarin wanted to test their binding engine, they shouldn't leave it to the consumers. They should test it themselves. So I just want to test everything downstream of the binding engine to verify that my view model is correct. If my view model is correct, then if it doesn't render properly on the page, then I can very easily point to the fact that it's the binding. Maybe the binding isn't spelled correctly. Maybe I'm doing XAML and the binding is in the XAML. But I want to test everything downstream. So I really want to test that given a state of my view model, that the view model actually has the properties that I expect. So let's go ahead and extend this a little bit because, okay, we're doing tap gestures. So one of the things that I do kind of quite often is that if the command definition can execute as false, I'll change the color on the on buttons. So like the button shouldn't be able to fire, and it's not clickable because the can execute isn't there. So what I'll do is actually invert the colors, if I remember correctly, and you'll have to excuse me, I haven't looked at this code in some time. Okay, yeah. So here we go, we'll change the, we'll get the button color blue, that's fine. So here we go. Background color of the button. Okay, so we'll take that, that's gonna be static button color. So what we'll do is we'll say, we'll go back to our login page. And there's a couple of ways that I can do this. I can do a binding in the view model. I think I'm going to try it the reactive way first, just because I know this is like a unit testing thing, but I write reactive code, so here we go. So let's see, button events. Do I have events? Do I have pharmacists pulled in? Maybe I don't. Does it seem like I do? Oh, maybe I should call it the name of the button and not the name of the control. Maybe that might actually work better. There we go. Now we got events. See how good of a programmer I am? I'm so good at the things. Let's say events dot. Oh, can we get the can execute? I don't even think we need that. I don't think we need the events. I think we can just do can execute. Or do I have to go against the view model? Maybe I have to go against the view model. Let's try this. Maybe we really don't want to do it that way. Maybe we will do it with a binding and like a two property. So let's do that. Let's go do it the fun way. We'll say that in the view model, we're pretty sure we've got a can execute on when we instantiate our here, right? So is valid. So okay, is valid is our. Oh, okay, perfect. So we've got something on the view model. So is valid will pipe out. So what we'll do is this. We'll go ahead and say we're going to change this a little bit. And let's actually see if anything's depending on is valid. There's two usages. We have one is invalid and take until is valid. Okay, so let's do this. Let's change this to our can execute. Let's do can login. So at least we're giving the context because it's like the main thing I can't stand is context. So now we've got an observable, and then what we'll do is I'll show you some composition tricks. We'll close that up real quick and close that down. And I'll show you some composition tricks. So now I can do underscore is valid equals can login dot to property and Glenn would yell at me and tell me not to take the performance hit of this, but I'm just doing quick and dirty code. Generally what you'll want to do here is pass in the name of the property, because then you don't have to deal with the reflection cost. Yeah, I'm actually going to kill that now because I candidly don't know how much value it's adding. I think it's just cluttering up the chat. So to property, and we'll call it can login. Right, so that doesn't exist right now. So Alt-Enter should get it. So we'll create a property, call it CanLogin. Now, you'll also see down here that I'm doing some explicit iNotify property change stuff. This is how Reactive UI does iNotify property change. There's also a Reactive UI.Fody package, but I've been burnt by Fody weavers in the past. No knock to Fody. Fody's a great tool, but I had an issue with it one time, and it took enough of my time to where, candidly, copying and pasting this and changing names is just easier to me. There's less magic that's going on. So sometimes I prefer less magic to more, even though people say, well, you do functional programming, all that stuff is magic. And I'm like, it's not, but you can call it magic if it makes us feel better. So we'll call this can login dot value, and that's going to end up being observable as property helper. You're probably going to ask me next, Rodney, what is an observable as property helper? It's this really cool thing that lets us pipe out an observable to a property. Most UI kits don't have an understanding of an observable, so you can't bind an observable through the binding engine. So we use this concept of an observable as property helper. Yes, the name is verbose, but I'll also tell you that I prefer verbosity to things that don't give me enough context as to what's happening. So I'll always choose a verbose name any day of the week. Not that I chose that name, but I'm okay with it. Some people think it's hideous, and I'm sorry. That's just that's the way life works. I think we have to set is valid now to can login. So we're just doing some simple thinking now. Could I have just done that a different way? I actually probably could have just done it like this. I could have just done it here. One less assignment. And then we'll just do that. And then we'll do is valid. But I kind of want that to say can log in because is valid is ambiguous in context. So we may come back to that, but I'm not going to mince too many words over this because it's not about naming, it's about unit testing. We still haven't shown any actual testing. So we'll bind this. First thing we'll do is we'll actually kind of test this. How we'll test this. I think I know how. Alright, so we're going to go into this unit test and we're going to do some funky junk. So we'll change this to should tick can execute. I know most people usually start off with like a simple test, but I'm going to start off with a complex test because let's just go ahead and make it as dirty as humanly possible. XUnit has a concept of being able to pass data into the function that you're testing. So if you have different states that you want to test and the states are going to be generally similar and give a similar output, or like let's say in our case we're actually going to test whether or not that validate method is working behind the scenes, we can pass in information to verify that it's going to do what it's supposed to do. So that hook is called a theory that lets you pass in data. As you saw before, a fact just lets you run code with no additional stuff. So here we get into and substitute dot for I want to say it's iAuth. Maybe we didn't add in the stuff. We didn't bring that in as a dependency, so we'll go ahead and bring in. So the other thing that, and somebody, and I apologize, I forgot the name, but there was somebody on my Twitter feed saying that they do a similar stream where they talk about unit testing with WPF, and from an MVVM perspective, it's the same. The answer to that is 100% correct. From the MVVM perspective, there's really no difference between unit testing a view model in Xamarin.Forms versus WPF. Where the purists will jump on you is the purists will tell you that if you're not testing the unit test on the platform that it comes from, or that you're running it on, that you're not getting a valid test. I would say that if that's going to be a barrier to you actually starting unit testing, then throw that barrier out, because it's candidly, it's stupid. Like, yes, I know you're not getting a 100% coverage, you're not getting a 100% apples to apples test, but the fact that it works in net standard and doesn't work against iOS also tells a story. So, if you get down to that point where the unit test is passing and this is breaking, then, okay, yeah, maybe it's worth spinning up a unit test harness on that framework. And I'll post a link in here. A while ago, a gentleman by the name of Greg Shackles wrote a blog post. Oh God, this is a while ago. This is almost 5 years ago now. Talked about unit testing with getting started with XUnit in Xamarin. So traditionally, Xamarin kind of supports NUnit because the Xamarin UI test only supports NUnit. But a lot of us developers in the open source community have migrated or started to migrate towards XUnit, and we prefer XUnit. So when I found that blog post that kind of made it more consumable to me, I learned how to use XUnit for my first time actually on the Cake project. When I was submitting some PRs to them on a consistent basis, I was digging in on XUnit, and it kind of sold me on it. So the other thing you'll notice, I'm not using the traditional like arrange, act, assert. I'm using behavior-driven concept or behavior-driven testing. So I'm using like given, when, and then. So given that I have some authenticator and I'm going to have some, we'll call this the system under test just for posterity, but you can call it view model if you want. We'll pass in the authenticator. So now we actually, so what, again, the DI allows us to abstract these things, and we would inject this thing. So when we're actually newing up a version of the view model, we have to inject, and this is where the end substitute comes in. End substitute allows me to substitute out this, and it just gives me a mock. So if I want the authenticator to throw an exception, which we'll see later, I can get the authenticator to throw an exception and see what the state of my view model is after that exception is thrown. As a matter of fact, that's another thing that we'll add to our page and to our view model in a little bit, on top of just the whole can execute and seeing whether or not the value is valid. We'll actually add a text that gets rendered to the screen, and the view model will get that text, and we'll see how that works out. So anyway, so system under test. All right, so when the system under test, so when the password equals some password, right? Because we'll pass that in. And also when the system under test dot login equals email, right? No, login is login. Email is email. Come on. Maybe it's username? Yeah, it's email address. Okay, because who doesn't use email address to authenticate these days? And again, talking about the binding engine, normally what would happen is, based upon our code here, there's a two-way bind from the email address to the password. So really what I'm simulating is the user put in some text, right? Like I don't really care how that text gets put in because I'm not testing everything from the view all the way down. And I'll actually, I'm only testing what is available to me at the time. So, and to me at the time, I can just change the mutability of those, or the values of those mutable properties and go to town. So we'll go ahead and pass in a couple of things where we know that regex will pass. So if I pass in, because everybody knows that I have a Gmail account, right? And everybody knows that my Gmail account is, right? Because who wouldn't use that as their Gmail password? I'm also going to pass in a couple other password configurations. So maybe here password has an @ symbol because that's a thing. Maybe we want to test whether or not, I don't remember exactly what our rules are. Maybe the password has to be over a certain length even though it's valid. So maybe just the password itself is valid. So this gives us the ability to test all of these inputs and the state in one unit test as opposed to having to write multiple unit tests. So we'll go ahead in again and we'll say, okay, so now the system under test that, what do we call that property? I thought we called the property. Can log in. Yeah, okay, so I thought we did. Can log in dot should. So this is that fluid assertions. Oh, something you'll notice that Rider just did that Visual Studio does not. Hint, hint. Let me take that out and actually show you, right? So here, fluent assertions is not loaded, right? But Ryder is smart and knows that I want to just go ahead and like I'm obviously going to want to add the only using statement that is viable for this particular method, so it automatically adds the using state for me, and that's just such an amazing thing for me. Because like every single time I have to stop in Visual Studio, Alt Enter or Control Dot or right click and do the thing, and it's just like it just does it, and that's nice. So we'll tell it that it should be true because we continue to digress. We've got all of this code. So now, based upon our rules, all this should work. So maybe we want to do an assertion ahead of time that the can login is false, just so that we get a chance to see the state change, right? So we'll see that if we do this here. So again, some of the purists will tell you that this is not the right way to do it, but you know what? I just want to verify that the state is there. I mean, why else write a unit test if not to do some level of verification? So we'll go ahead and run those unit tests. Right, so far so good, right? This is not rocket science. This is not extremely hard. We have some dependencies that we mock out. Microsoft Framework desktop app was not recognized. What? Go back to editing the CS project, Microsoft Net SDK, Net Core App 3.0. Maybe I need to switch to 3.1 or 3.0 real quick just to see what happens. Maybe that's a problem. I've got the Visual Studio runner code, the X unit. I don't see why I would be getting this error. This is when I wish somebody smarter than me was watching so they could be like, hey, Rodney, that's the reason why you're getting this horrible error. All right, so now we get to resolve this issue live on stream. Maybe we'll ping our friend David Driscoll and see if he knows the answer to this, because he knows the answers to a lot of things that elude me at moments. Yeah, but show me the output. Like, where's the output? Where's the application output? Come on. Yeah, I get that. So, all right, here we go to Googling. Not recognized. Oh, look, I've already Googled this and found an issue on .NET Core about this. Debian, so it says you have acquired .NET Core through Debian. Maybe you can post more context around the error. The root issue here is that the .NET targeting pack should have been published at 3.0.0. I have not had this issue in weeks. Obviously, otherwise, 3.0 is out of date, tar.gz, blah blah nonsense. Let's do this. Let's just go ahead and let's clear the terminal. Ls. Let's clear it again. What we're looking for is .NET list SDKs. So I've got 301, 310, and 3101 loaded. .NET. Maybe it's smart enough to know. Oh, okay. It wants me to explicitly do -h. There we go. So let's do. What are we missing? Can we see the runtimes? Yeah, I can list runtimes the same way. Okay, so let's just verify that I have the runtime. --list runtimes. Oh, it's a lot more runtimes than I expected. I don't know why my unit test project is barfing on this, though. This seems like a really problematic issue. Target framework. Let's do this, target frameworks. Yeah, no, it doesn't. But maybe that'll trick you into believing that I know what I'm talking about and you'll do your thing. It could also possibly be like the XUnit version, so maybe I've had to go to like XUnit 4. Or 2.4.1 in the past, maybe. I don't know. Let's just try all the things and stuff and not pay any attention to what actually worked, and let's keep moving, right? That seems to be the thing. Oh my goodness. Well, let's copy that. Alright, so let's see if Driscoll's around. Middle of the live stream, we hit a dot. So wasn't I just earlier talking about, oh, the .NET Core experience still isn't great on Mac and there's still problems? Oh, look at this. Look at this. Thank you for proving me right, .NET. I'm fucking up in the middle of this. I guess I probably shouldn't be able to say that either. I'm probably going to get flagged. Oh, well. I candidly do not know how to resolve this off the top of my head. And, of course, the GitHub issue is like miles long and has been open since November, and I don't remember where I was the last time. Okay, so thanks. Looks like it's working great. I do think that you're hitting the error from ASP.NET Core. Yeah, I'm just using the Microsoft SDK. Am I using? I don't think I'm using MS Build SDK extras, so that won't be the problem. Yeah, I'm definitely not using extras. And I know that my projects are using package reference. What are we? Yeah, I know I'm a couple of Xamarin versions back. Shh, don't judge me. Like I said, I pulled this code up an hour ago and realized that this is probably a good starting point. Well, what in the world? So this has more package references. All that has 28.0, Xamarin Essentials, all that stuff is fine. So none of that alludes to what I thought the problem could be. Let's go back to the Google and see if the Google has good answers for me. So now, okay, there's another issue. Yeah, okay, so then I'll just downgrade it to 2 for the moment, because we have the 2.2 runtime installed, so we should be able to get away with it. So let's build it now and see what happens. Yep, it's that .NET Core 3 stuff. .NET Core 3 was very desktop focused, which is not a problem, but I find that a lot of the stuff that went into .NET Core 3 inadvertently broke some stuff in Xamarin along the way. Now, granted, they got it, most of it fixed before the release, but being on the beta bits, some of this stuff just felt like it was breaking. Like a lot of people are starting to target Net Standard 2.1 with no real reason to target Net Standard 2.1. They're just targeting Net Standard 2.1. It's just like, well, maybe you shouldn't. But what does this guy know, right? And I say that because Xamarin doesn't support Net Standard 2.1 yet, so if you I get it, you're writing a Blazor app and Blazor targets 2.1, so I'm going to target 2.1, but if you ever have any plans for your Blazor stuff to work on Xamarin, you're going to have to do 2.0, at least for now. I haven't read anywhere that they fixed it. So anyway, I'll get off my little soapbox. I got a couple of them behind me, so I may pick another one up in a minute and stand on it and preach from the mountaintops. We'll just run them because YOLO. Oh, they all pass. That's actually scary when unit tests pass, because, or the first time, because test-driven development tells us the first thing we're supposed to do is write a failing unit test, and of course, we're not doing this. So let's just verify that it did actually do the thing by changing this assert. So again, this is fluent assertions, fluent style assertions, as opposed to like doing assert, system under test.can login, comma true. This is just cleaner to me. So if I rerun this now, hopefully these will all turn red and make me feel a little bit better about the fact that I didn't just write a false positive test. Haha! I win again. Okay, so now I can at least accept the fact that this is correct. So that means that all of my passwords are fine, right? So let's also, because we're good citizens and good testers, let's go ahead and test the inverse case. Should not, oh wait, and I use this underscore style again. Don't take my styling as any type of dogma. These are things that I've just used, techniques that I've used, ways that I've written unit tests. If you like it, use it. If you don't. If you want to have in-depth conversation with me, or if you just want to excoriate me on Twitter and say that Rodney guy's way of doing unit tests is horrible, let's get down. Let's do it, because I don't really care. The key is that I'm writing unit tests, and I've been in places where they don't even think writing unit tests is valuable. It's one thing. There's like progressions, right? Yes, we accept that unit tests are valuable. Then we have to get to, yes, we're actually going to make a concerted effort to write those unit tests. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. And as I had a conversation, probably about 2 weeks ago, with Michael Stonis, we both concluded that it's not really about whether or not you write the unit test itself. Writing unit tests is about writing unit testable code. If your code isn't unit testable, then it's probably not architected as good as it could be. And that's one of the things that unit testing kind of shows us, is if we actually go down that route and write the unit testable code, that we can derive value from clean architecture. Because writing unit testable code will force us to do some level of dependency injection. It will force us to do certain good practices as we're writing our code. So writing the unit test helps us write unit testable code, but it's not the only way to write unit testable code. And the key takeaway from all this is writing unit testable view models. So not passing statics around like we used to do a lot in the old Xamarin.Forms days. Like when I first came to Xamarin.Forms, all the samples for everything in Xamarin was static, taking a static, sticking it in somewhere, and getting a result. And I'm just like, can we abstract these things and do some solid principles? Because that's scary to me. So I'll explain this. Generally, what I do is I test the thing. So I'm probably testing the login view model, not the login states. So we'll do login view model tests, and I'm actually going to explicitly apply name refactoring and rename the file. I'm explicitly going to create a different class for each property, and you'll see why I do that later, because when I'm looking at it specifically in the unit test explorer visually, it actually helps group the unit tests pretty well. And I've gone back and forth about this with developers. Because there's all sorts of ways to skin this cat. No real way is better than the others. This is just a technique that I've started to use and I like, because it lets me segregate my tests into downstream classes without having to have multiple files just to test one class. Because technically I could do class per file and go through that whole rigmarole, but it's unit tests, and as long as the greens are lit up, they're working, and as they're reds and I can't navigate around to them easily, then we have a problem. Alright, so we explicitly want to make sure that the can login stays false. This actually probably needs to be should not be true. Should not log in. Yeah, let's just change that. Should log in. Yeah, should. No, naming's hard. So I know that there's some stuff on there, like if I take this at gmail.com, it will stay false. I know what. Oh, my name is a typo because that's how you spell little, and there's no pluralization for it anywhere in the world, right? Like no one ever actually uses the pluralization for that word. I actually had somebody get my name wrong once, and it was like horribly misspelled, but they just couldn't get the fact that it was little. It was wild. So we'll just go ahead and do that, because that's, I don't know, maybe a way that somebody could screw their password up when they're fat fingering stuff. And I think that it has to explicitly have a .com, so we'll take that off too. And if it doesn't have these things, although I think it should, we can always actually go look. So we'll go F12 to the view model, and we'll go see what is our validation method looking for. It's got a regex. So the other thing this actually lets me do is test my regex in a testable manner. So technically I should have written a unit test specifically for the regex, just to make sure that the regex matches. But yeah, this regex is explicitly going to be looking for an @ symbol and then some words. It's not looking explicitly for the .com, so some of these tests may fail. But this gives us an understanding of, what is valid input, right? Where we may not have actually known that earlier. And as you see, the tests live with the code. They're executable from the command line via .NET tests. Let's bring up a terminal again here, and let's do some .NET test and see what happens. Hopefully, nope, it's gonna blow up. No, it's not. Passed all 6 tests. Okay, which means that should be false. So that tests those. What else did we do? What did we do around the password? So let's verify that the password. Now we're going to actually get into more granular. Should not log in if email not valid. Should not log in. That's fine. And let's just take that, because who wants to type all those words again? Don't tell anybody that you saw me copy paste. Oh, I guess the whole world can see it now, because it's going to be loaded to YouTube. The whole world is going to see that Rodney's a developer that just copies and pastes code. Oh no. What will you think of me? I had a professor a long time ago, and I remember this gentleman because he actually helped change my entire development path, my entire career around development. But he always said, if you copy and paste code, that you should write another method. And I'm not that dogmatic about it, but I have listened to that, and it has saved me a lot of headache and consternation in my life cycle. So now let's go ahead and test to see specifically. So this kind of gets into, we can test all the inputs at once, or we can write another theory that tests specifically the password. So now, kind of given these things, I can give it a valid, I can either test the email in isolation given the fact that these passwords are correct, or I can test them in isolation. I think for the purposes of this, I'm going to do it on a separate one. Yeah, it's brain. I'm going to do it in a separate test just because I like different tests. I mean, it'll literally be the same amount of tests that show up in the Test Explorer. That won't change. Should not log in if password. So now I actually have no idea what our concept of a valid password is. So let's go check to see what our concept of valid password is. We've got a valid email. And okay, so it's just to be above 5 characters. Cool. That makes this real easy test. So let's go back up here and grab this rodneylittles@gmail.com, which we know is a valid email address. Now you all know what my email address is, so please feel free to spam me with horrible emails so I can report you to Google. I'm a comedian in my own head, so that was funny. I'm sorry if my type. I'm working on my type 5 for the comedy club, so if you don't like it, you can leave comments on that to that effect too. Probably won't stop me from making bad jokes though, because who doesn't laugh at horrible jokes? Okay, so let's do this really fun. So let's do P. Let's copy that and let's get rid of all those. So let's do 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So it's going to be less than 5. So P, A, somewhere along the way I hit cap locks, W, S, S, W, O. Is that's more. Oh, we can test the empty case. Derp. Let's test the empty case. And I don't know it won't take string.empty. God dog it. I prefer to use string.empty, but I understand that it doesn't always take it. So now we'll do another set of tests, because again, even if I had done these tests up here and just done these as inline data up here, they would have showed up in the test explorer as the same exact amount of tests. Let's hopefully build this, and we'll see. No, all my tests went away because I renamed them, and I was doing it based on that. So we'll run all the tests again. But you see how this kind of gives me an instant feedback loop? Like, I don't have to go in and load up the browser and type in these passwords to verify. Like, if QA reports a bug and they say, "Hey Rodney, I type in this username and this password, and it's valid and it shouldn't be," well, I just take that username and that password and I add another inline data and I verify whether or not QA is feeding me a load of stuff, or if they actually found that Rodney made a mistake, which Rodney makes a lot of mistakes. To err is human, right? So, yeah, so now all of these tests pass. Again, just to prove that, because we're not doing it proper TDD, because proper TDD would tell you that it should happen in a completely different way. We'll go back and run this again. We've got another set, and we'll run selected. Oh, I have not been paying attention to the chat. I've been just over here talking to myself. Oh, there's no one here. That's great. Makes this easy. Okay, so I'm getting Slack messages. Uh-oh. Okay, so I'm going to kill Slack again, even though the notifications are just going to come through to my watch, so my wrist is going to be vibrating every 10 seconds. Yay. All right, so yeah, so this actually does tick true. So now we know that that's a thing. So now what have we done? We've basically said that, let's close all that excess stuff. So we've basically created an observable, right? But again, don't worry about that magic. You are creating a bindable property. And we're basically saying that this bindable property can log in, is going to have this value, and we're going to go ahead and pipe that out to this can login. So now, and you can't see my emulator because me and live streaming are still kind of figuring ourselves out. So hopefully this will get better as I do more of these things. But what we want to do is, I think in our page we want to bind explicitly on that, or maybe we want to do something around the lines of like, so now I'm going to do some gnarly stuff. Dot is valid dot is valid dot start with false dot distinct until changed. Yeah, this is all just going to be a whole bunch of RX magic. Subscribe, and what we're going to do on the subscription is we are actually going to physically change the values of the page. So instead of doing like triggers and all of the value update nonsense that Xamarin.Forms wants me to do, I can very easily just come in here and change my properties, right? So like I can go login button dot background color, and I can set that to, let's set it to just gray, color gray, right? So the background color is going to be gray, and then the foreground color is going to be whatever. Can we even get to that? Yeah, we're gonna do all the wrong things right now. Dot resources dot let's just do resources. And what's the resource that we want? We explicitly want this button color. All right, so we're gonna go grab button color out of there. Yeah, of course. Resource dictionary doesn't work that way, does it? Yeah, it's an object. All right, so then maybe we won't do that, and instead, yeah, because this is exactly why I don't tend to use the resource dictionary. Mike Stonis and I, again, were having a conversation about that not too long ago. Some days this is honestly just easier to just put in a static const file for colors and call it a freaking day, because trying to get into it and out of it, there's a lot of ceremony around this, and I'm not convinced that it, from a performance perspective, that it's not just cheaper to go ahead and text color. So we'll just change this to white for now. We'll go with bisque. You like bisque. I'm not convinced that that's faster. So I really think sometimes that a static const file for colors and widths and all that stuff is really just a better practice than trying to pipe all of that into the resource dictionary, because who knows. So now we're gonna check the is valid distinct until change. So basically this is some RX magic that says whenever this observable ticks, and remember this observable is what's feeding into this property value. So technically what I should do is bind this property and do the color changes somehow based on that, but I feel like being lazy and doing it the fun way, because who doesn't like to have fun when they're being a developer? Oh wait, you can't do that. You have to have an iOS emulator. And again, you can't see my emulator, but my emulator is going to come up, and we're going to hit a breakpoint. Alright, so my emulator's up. Again, you can't see it, so off we go on another adventure. Okay, so we're here, and we start with false, and we're going to be distinct until change, so we're going to change the background color from what it is to gray. So you see this is working. Yep, alright, great. So over here, error. Oh, no, that's just observable stuff. Okay, so yeah, over here in my emulator, what you can't see is that it actually did change the color. So we'll go ahead and change this, and we'll do what's my password, right? My password is password. Oh, there we go. So the observable ticked as soon as I got to W, which again, you can't see. That's fine. And of course, Ryder decided to pick up right where it left off. Ah, okay. You see what Rodney did? Rodney's smart. So we'll go ahead and change this back, right? We'll kill this. Alright, again, we'll show some object composition. And we'll do this, introduce a variable. We'll call this is valid. So we're going to start with false, right? That means there's less value there. So is valid distinct until change dot where x such that not x, right? So basically what I'm saying is give me a value where there's no, or where it's not true, do these things. And then I'm going to do we can actually move this distinct until change up here and just do that all off the composition, because that's really what we want to do actually. So now we're saying all of that is part of that initial composition, and then here, when it is true, now I'll say this may be overkill. I may run into a huge performance issue because Rodney's creating all of these observables all over the place, although I highly doubt that. I want to say I have some operators that explicitly do the truth-false values for me, but I don't have it with me right now, so we'll do this, right? And we'll set that, and we'll say so here, all right, so here, login button background color. We want that to be, oh, here we go again. How do we get this out of the static resource? Probably hearing all my Slack notifications. Yeah, it doesn't like that actually. So what am I missing? Because I feel like I've done this before. Application.current.resources string value as color. No? What type does background color take? Takes type color. Operator must be referenced or nullable because C#8 is a thing. If I change it to, whoa. Okay, let's just be smart about this, right? Because basically it's just gonna yell at me and say, okay, I need to cast you properly. So we'll come over here and cast it over here. Application. All right, so here we want the, and again, I generally don't do this way, but I do some level of static evaluation button text color. So we'll do the same thing here. We'll just drop this here, grab that there, change that to button text. Hey, so yeah, copy and paste is bad. Cut and paste is good. Long and short, you want to paste less than or cut more than you paste. All right, so again, I could have done a simple if statement, and I could have just done if x, and I could have done that all in the same subscription. But you know, Rodney's special, so he likes to do special things sometimes just to prove that he can, and see if there's a performance issue. I doubt that there will be, but you know, such is life. This also gives me a chance to show that there's object composition in the world, which is one of the things that makes observables amazing to me, that you can just go down this path and do this thing. So we'll go ahead and run this again. Again, you can't see my emulator, so I apologize. All right, so yeah, so their initial tick is going to tick that. Good. So now we'll go ahead and give it a valid email address, Gmail, and my password of 123. Again, it gets to D and it comes over here, so that proves that I don't have to type in everything. It just has to hit the thing and the code reacts and my declarative programming kicks in. So now it's going to do this maybe. Hey. And my button over here is actually live now. So you'll have to trust me on that. This source will be of it, or actually currently is available. I'll paste the source to this code, or a link to the source for this code, so you can laugh at it and maybe learn some RX stuff. Again, it's part of a demo that I do, or a live demonstration that I do for a talk on app state, so you'll have to dig through some of that. But this is the link to it on the GitHubs. And I'll also paste Greg Shackle's blog post about this. Now, again, one of the things that I haven't showed and that I probably won't show, or I will show just because, is some of the stuff that Greg talks about in that link. Basically, what you need to do is stand up a test runner. So in this case, you saw us add here Visual Studio as the test runner. In order to test this on iOS or Android, actually execute the unit test on that runtime, we would technically need to stand up a runtime. So Greg Shackles lays out exactly how you would do that. I've done it. It's not that hard. And I can kind of go over it in a minute. I'll probably the last thing I go over once I get everything lightened up green. But this gives you a vignette into, I can test the state of my view model and then verify that whatever it's bound to will actually do its thing. That way I'm not actually testing the binding engine. I'm not concerned about the binding engine. I'm only concerned about the state of my view models, which if you've been developing production applications long enough, you know that state management is like one of the main things that developers lose sleep over. What's the proper way to manage state? When do you update state? How do you update state? Again, the reason why I like reactive programming is because I don't dictate state. The app dictates the state, and I just react to what the app tells me. So we've got a couple things here. Let's go look. I wonder, can we actually test that? Can we get... Ooh, if I bring in that... Okay, so there's one more thing that I'll bring up that I'm not going to go over today, but I am going to play with personally. It's from Jonathan Peppers. Gets. Yeah. Pinky in the Brain was a thing when I was growing up, so... Maybe not when I was growing up, but at the time I was still watching cartoons. Oh, wait. I still watch cartoons. Fun fact. Last thing I'll post in this chat is going to be this. I would assume that if I add this package and I do this stuff, that I should very easily be able to get that. So maybe that'll be the last thing we do. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, it looks like good stuff. Maybe we'll save that for another time because I don't. I've had enough fail for one stream, I think. But let's continue down the path, right, and show, because I'm one of the people that hates contrived examples. The simple example. I'm a real world developer. I solve real world problems. Like, show me a real world problem. Don't just show me the hello world to-do list and send me on my way. Like, I get no value from that. So if you're like me, you may not get value from that. So here we go. This is kind of why I do this thing. We're actually going to now test the login command. So now I can come over here and because white space is a thing, public class, the login command. Do we actually call it login command? What do we call it in the view model there? Anybody paying attention? Because I'm not. Where did our view model go? Oh, the other thing that you'll see about this sample that may or may not be weird to you, you'll notice, first off, a lot of this junk is just kind of out there. I didn't bother to put it anywhere, but you'll notice that I actually didn't create a separate project for services because this was just a simple contrived example. But more importantly, you'll notice this. Instead of having views and view models, one of the things that I do is I like to group logic. I listened to a talk, Jimmy Bogart did a talk, God, it had to be 2015, the first time I saw it maybe, about feature slices. So I like to keep things that are relevant grouped together. So, because this is a contrived example and I don't have to have my view models in a separate project so I can target multiple targets, like I'm really just targeting iOS and Android. It's a Xamarin.Forms project, so I don't need to go through all that. I like to do this. Candidly, even if I had the view models in a separate project, I would still do this, because how many times do I have to create a page and a list view and a cell and all of these other things? And I just like to group all that stuff together in one place. So yeah, there's another soapbox I just picked up. Yay. Yeah, we won't test that. So yeah, okay, it's just login. So here we will test the login command, all right, and we'll do public void should. I don't know what it should do yet. Let's actually make it respond to an error, right? So we noticed here, let's look at it, the command itself is executing this command, and it's just calling this authenticator, which is our dependency that we sent in, and it's calling authenticate. So let's just assume that authentication throws like a, I don't know, like let's say it's got a 500 error, or maybe it can't connect to the internet, and we explicitly throw an error. So I'll do given var indicator equals substitute dot when, yeah, gotta remember the syntax, when x authenticate is called, r dot is, or wait, yeah, r dot any. Sorry, I was using MOQ on some project work last week, and now that I'm back here, I'm like, how do I do that again? So it's going to be arg any string. So this basically just tells n substitute that any string value will work. So I could explicitly pass in a string value and expect that string value. So I could easily say like this, right? Anytime you see Rodney, then it does this thing. And maybe, we do that for the sake of our test, but right now I don't care. I just want when any string gets passed into this authenticate method, I explicitly want to do a thing. And the thing that I want to do is at the end of the when, and I'll do, and I'll make this easier to read in exception in a second. Throw new exception. Your auth is terrible. Yeah. Maybe I should learn to spell. Yay, alright, so this is another thing. When I do functional programming, I like things on separate lines because, as you see, it just makes it more readable and easier to deal with. Yes, it's verbose. Yes, actually there is technically no extra white space because, Writer shows me that there's white space and there is no white space. But this makes it human readable. Bob Martin talks about, anybody can write code. A good developer writes human readable code. So the compiler is going to understand anything as long as it's valid syntax. But a developer, this is easier on the eyes. So whenever I call authenticate, it's going to throw this exception. And I'm actually probably going to show you another pattern in a minute because why not? I'll actually create a fixture here in a second. So then I'll do var system under test equals new. Equals new login view model. We're going to pass it in the authenticator, right? So then we'll do when system under test dot login dot execute dot subscribe because it's an observable. And again, just pay no attention to the man behind the mask. If you ever want to talk about observables, anyone who knows me knows that I will talk your ear off ad nauseum about it. We explicitly want to catch the exception. XUnit has an exception recorder. So we're going to do a result equals, and we're going to record dot exception. So this is where things get fun. I can technically await this because observables are awaitable, but I won't break your brain today. I'll just kind of make it simple. And I'll just say that whenever this exception is thrown, no, not a, there go my notorious fat fingers again. All right, so that should catch it. So we should be able to say now, we should be able to say result dot should be of type exception, right? Which message should be. So this is again a case for fluent assertions. I can just assert everything in the same thing, right? So your authentication is bad, right? I know this is going to fail, but I'm explicitly, again, trying to write a failing unit test. And again, because Rodney is OCD and anal about the things, I get that it doesn't hit the line break over here, but I still prefer to do this because even though it bloats the length of the file, that doesn't matter once it's been compiled. Again, it's human readable. So the result should be of this type, which the message should be this, right? So that makes it real simple for somebody to read. Not a lot of guesswork in that. Oh, hey, it passed. No? Shouldn't have passed. Let's see. Okay, so remember earlier. Nobody's paying attention to me. There we go. Now you see it light up over here. Okay, perfect. So remember how I told you earlier that I like to do this syntax because this allows me to group things? You'll notice that under this class, now I have two methods that I can deal with. So should throw exception. Now this is going to be interesting because it's in an observable pipeline. Maybe it might not actually do it the way I want it to. Maybe I may have to actually subscribe to the errors being thrown. But should throw exception. Yeah, so that's fine. Should throw the exception. We'll see if this works. If it doesn't, then maybe I'll step back and punt. Again, this is all live coding, and I'm learning how to live code. And unfortunately, you get to see it. Ooh, I broke it. So this is what I was talking about the other day, where I was talking to somebody about this the other day, where .NET will just .NET Test will unexpectedly quit if you're doing magic in places where you shouldn't. So I'm going to assume now that this is actually not being caught here, and that this is actually probably being, this is probably doing some weird stuff under the hood. I may actually change this to the awaitable syntax just to make life easier for myself. Yep, it's a scheduling issue. Yay! Rodney broke the scheduler. What's my exception? I handles observables is breaking its... Yep, yeah, I called it. Okay. I am so smart. I am so smart. SMRT. Don't! So that means that it's throwing inside of here. Inside of where login executes. So maybe I should catch it and bubble it back up so that it's not unhandled. Or maybe what I think I need to do. So, okay, maybe I might not be able to use the exception recorder, so maybe this was bad. But let's try this. Let's try a couple different tactics. So I've got a blog post coming on this. Async void is bad. Don't do it. Void is a return type. That is the void is actually the absence of a return type. This means that thing will technically never actually return. So from an async perspective, that's the equivalent of fire and forget. Now I know what you're going to say. Hey, well then I can use it for fire and forget. Well, then you don't get a lot of other things. There are a lot of blog posts that cover that. I'm going to cover it from a different aspect, which is specifically talking about how it will interrupt and give you unexpected behaviors in observable pipelines. So anyway. So now let's try this. And this is probably still not going to get it because it's going to be outside of the stuff. But we'll do async. We'll do await. And we'll change this to record exception async. Yeah, no, you need to bring in an extension pack. And we'll see if this works now. So you're going to let me? No, you're not going to let me run it? Oh, I'm still running. That's why. Stop. Stop all. Yep, yeah, I'm crashing .NET over here. Reopen.NET, sure, that's a thing. So I wonder now. Let's do system_test dot thrown exceptions dot subscribe underscore. Let's do. We'll have to create it out here. Bar exception. Let's actually change that to exception. Right, so that way it'll have a null value, so we may have to check for null. We'll set this to it. We'll actually probably call this result now that I think about it, so that I can change this. Yes, I know, I'm so horrible. Let's change that to exception, because why wouldn't we? Right, so we're explicitly doing that. I'll put the breakpoint there so we can check it, and then what we're going to do is check the result. Okay, so we'll do an explicit assert here as a result that should not be null. Is that not what it's complaining about? Must be initialized before accessing. Well, that's fine. We'll just give it to a new exception, because we're checking the exception message anyway, so I guess it really won't matter, but whatever, that's fine. And I just need to do system_test.login.execute.subscribe. Oh, this is a funny one. Now I'm thinking that it's possible that it's blowing up because the login actually can't execute. No, because the authenticator is giving it explicit, so that's probably not the case. Because it's not checking in the method. The method has the instantiation of it has a can execute on it. So we'll see. Okay. So let's try that just to be safe, right? Because we've got a system_test. So system_test dot email equals my Gmail password, which now you can all get into my Gmail and check all of my glorious emails. Right, okay. So maybe this will actually solve my problem, because maybe it's hitting the can execute and I just don't feel like debugging through it to verify. I've not seen this one in a while, so we'll see how this works out. And of course I launched the emulator instead of running the... But again, you see how like I'm looking at this in the IDE, and I'm not having to go through the cycles of launching the application and going through the rigmarole of typing stuff into the screen. Like, I've got a test right here that simulates my input, simulates my output, and gives me, ooh yeah, yep, it's still breaking, and it's breaking on the observation. No, there we go. Result should be an exception, which the message. So, it aborted. I don't know how to fix this without doing more magic. Wait. Because like this is a reactive UI issue that I'm basically coding myself into right now. So maybe I should just not do this right now and come back to this later and show you the next thing that I probably will want to show you, which is like test fixtures. So I'll come back to that. I'll clean up that code off screen later and come back to that, because I'm running up on time anyway. I'm gonna get off here in a minute. The last main thing that I want to kind of show is like this specific builder pattern that we use. Am I giving now that I'm thinking about it, like because of course I'm a developer that can't let stuff go. So am I looking for something on a specific thread? I am not looking for anything on a specific thread, so that shouldn't matter. That executes from async. It's an observable from async, so this is going to be okay. So it's doing some async nonsense for me. So the awaiting of it, it's breaking its observable pipeline, and I don't exactly know why off the top of my head, and I don't feel like digging into it, so I'll just leave it for now, and I'll kind of show you one last trick / technique. One of the things that I create are these test fixtures. So you'll notice in this, I have to pass in this authenticator, and this code can get very verbose. XUnit has the ability for me to act, and because I have multiple nested classes, I would actually have to do it at this level. But I can technically do this at this level, and again, a lot of my peers and a lot of purists will say, oh, well, you should use the constructor because XUnit has this thing built in for that. I know that that XUnit creates the state for me per test. I know. To me, this is so much less explicit than having everything contained in the unit test. So technically, I could create a system under test or a view model property and pass that down here. So I could do something like login view model equals that, and then no, let's do this public login, yeah, public login get set. There we go. So technically, I can do that, and then down here I can just say viewModel.can login. This will create an instance per test. There will be no shared state. Okay, whatever. I don't do it because I don't. So again, find me, debate me, yell at me, tell me my programming sucks. I probably won't care, candidly, but you can tell me if it makes you feel better. Because that's what it's about. It's about making sure that you feel better about how I do my thing. Oh, I couldn't keep a straight face. So actually, this is going to be internal because we don't need it to be external. So internal class, login view model fixture, and I'm going to inherit from this iBuilder, which you saw me bring in reactive UI testing earlier. So this is actually something that we use in reactive UI integration tests. What it does is it just gives us some default methods. So we actually made it part of the overall offering that we send out, but this is just an interface, and then we create some default extension methods off that interface, and which you'll see in a second. But this is going to be the fun part. Static implicit operator view model login view model fixture builder. So technically this is a builder. We're using the builder pattern. I'm explicitly not going to care about that right now, and I'm going to call it a fixture because I call them fixtures. We could again debate around in circles. What's the best thing to call it? What's the best way to implement this? Again, I would rather see you writing unit tests and writing unit testable code than care about some dogmatic approach and letting that block your entry to doing these things. So we'll return a new login view model. Okay, I should probably explain the syntax. We are creating an implicit operator that is going to convert a login view model to a login view model fixture. And I will, as this code kind of unfurls, you'll see more about what that means. So the majority of my stuff, I'm only going to need basic functionality. So we'll do like a underscore authenticator equals substitute.for I authenticator, right? And we'll stash that somewhere. We'll then send this down here. And the reason why this build is private, you'll see in a second, because I actually don't want you to do it from the view model. I want you to automatically do this thing. So how we're going to convert that, we'll just go back up here to this test right here, right? And now instead of having to have all of this quote unquote cruff, and it's not going to work if we do it the way that most people want to do it, but we can just do a new view model fixture, right? Well, you'll notice that the typing doesn't know how to deal with this. And the reason is because it's doing an explicit operation. So this is where we're going to get into var is bad. And I've had conversation ad nauseum where, yes, the compiler knows what it is, and that's all that matters. Again, if humans can't read it and humans don't understand it, it becomes a problem. I was not a fan of var when it first got introduced into C#, but I am now. So you'll notice that as soon as I give it an explicit type, all of this just goes back to resolving. So now instead of having to put that same 2 lines of code, and you'll see why this becomes more fun later. Instead of having to put these same 2 lines of code in everywhere, we've effectively minimized it. And I'm going to move that to its own file because why not? You'll see that we've explicitly made it easier to create a fixture. And we're just creating a test fixture, right? Because we know what the dependencies are and we can mock and stub those out. So now what I'm going to do is create a method public. Login view model fixture is going to be the return type, and we're going to do with authenticator. And we're going to take in a version of authenticator, and we're going to do this with ref underscore authenticator with the value, or no, we don't want value, we have the value, we have the authenticator there. And now, in the event I need the authenticator to do something specific, like here, let's say I need to do, when authenticator dot return, I guess it doesn't actually return anything but a task, does it? Or dot authenticate arg dot any string arg dot any string. I think this just returns a task, right? It doesn't even return a boolean. No, it just returns a task. So maybe this isn't again, this is a contrived example, but we'll just do task.completed task, right? Just to point out the fact of what you have availability to do. So now if I come over here and I say new login view model fixture, right? And I can do that with authenticator, and I can pass it an explicit authenticator. And now this particular test is going to use the version of the authenticator that I pass in here. So in the event that this particular test or this particular suite of tests needs to override a specific thing, I can do that here and then still get value out of this here. But again, the typing doesn't know what to do. So we'll come here, save that. And now we've got this thing that we can inject. I'll go ahead and prove to you real quick that it's actually doing the thing. So we'll put a breakpoint there, and I think we'll put a breakpoint there. All right, and we'll go ahead and find the test, and we'll come here and we'll do. Does it give me? Yeah, just debug. I just want to debug that. Oh, I guess I have to debug all because it's theory. All right, so we're going to new up this thing, and we're going to step in, and we'll notice that the authenticator is using this one with that, but the current authenticator has a different version, right? So you see that it's a different unique key. So then we'll hit F5 again, and you'll see that this one has the wrong key. That's weird. Oh, because we haven't actually hit the width. Builder.build. So this is some other test dot. Let me see if I can get to the private. Because now I'm wondering why it's using that one when it should be using this one. Of course, the code wants to prove me wrong today. I'm explicitly providing it the reference, so that should all work correctly. This authenticator has that. And I've used this technique ad nauseum, and I've never seen this happen, so this is extremely awkward. Now I'm going to have to go back and verify that I haven't been using this pattern completely and totally incorrectly. Alright. Oh, you get a chance to see it live while I'm recording. That doesn't exist in the current context. but that is existing in the current context. So because the way this should work is the fixture should instantiate and then it should call the build method after, and I'm explicitly passing back that, so that means that it's not going to explicitly resolve the build early, so that should all function correctly. Okay, well I know it works because I use it. It's just weird. So that's another technique that just makes creating copies of view models for your system under test to be easier to deal with. And I think the last thing I'll show is the bit from Greg Shackles on how to, or from XUnit really, but from the blog post that I linked on from Greg Shackles about how to do more. So we will go ahead and do a new project. We will come down here and we'll do a unit test project for Xamarin. That's actually weird that it does that. That shouldn't be the case. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to do an app. Oh, I haven't done this in a while. Xamarin.Forms, Xamarin Native, iOS. Yeah, that's fine. We want to stick it in a special folder. Oh, we didn't put tests in the source folder, so this is just going to go outside of that. That's fine. So we'll just do that. May actually be part of a problem. We'll call this login state.ios.runner. We will come in here, and I'll show you the NuGet stuff here. So we'll do xunit runner devices, and this thing is smart enough to know all the special stuff around which target platform I'm installing it on and how to do the proper thing. Did it finish? Okay, there we go. All right, so you'll notice that it created this text file, and it basically just wants me to take this and replace what's in my app delegate, which is fine. Definitely don't do it twice. Only need to do it once. App delegate and diff finish launch. Yeah, import the missing. So this runner app delegate is the important part. It actually creates a iOS host in which to run login. Make sure they execute part of the app bundle. So tests are good. Alright, so we'll see type of login state. Expected a namespace, but found namespace. Oh, okay. I can just give it a type. Login view model tests. And I think that what I need to do, I think part of the problem is I need to add a reference. So I'll add a reference to this is being weird. Haven't been that long since I've done this. It should. Oh. I know why. I know why. We're going to do something that we probably should get standard 2.0. So we're going to dump it out to both, and that way now that when this thing figures itself out, I should now be able to add one for tests. Da-da-da-da. It's always the little things that are so simple that we miss. Tests. All right, so now when I run the iOS runner, hopefully all will be well. You won't be able to see the output, but I encourage you to go do it on your own. Greg add screenshots to it. Stop because we're using the iOS default. What we want to do is edit, and we want to do a copy, and we're going to call this iOS test runner. And the target, instead of that, is going to be the iOS test runner. So we're actually going to run an actual emulator that will let us execute those tests in that emulator and capture the output of those tests in the emulator and display it on the screen. You can do the same thing for Android. So this is where I said earlier where most people will say they'll give you that dogma where if you're not testing it on the platform, you're not actually testing it. Okay, that's great. Some testing is better than no testing. So don't let that be the thing that stops you. The other thing is that when it just is a .NET Core app, I can run it in .NET Test in a CI build easily on Azure DevOps. The emulator experience in Azure DevOps is not as good as it is on App Center. So it becomes a little bit more cumbersome. I know some people that are doing it, and I just need to sit down and wrap my brain around it so I can make it part of my thing. But right now, it's not part of my regularly scheduled programming. So off to the races, yeah. Do we have an emulator going? Oh yeah, we do. We have an emulator going, and we're going to click run everything, and hopefully that means it's actually going to run some tests. It's probably going to fail on that test that we wrote that's going to blow up. Oh no. We probably shouldn't be running this one, but whatever. Actually, let's 0 passed, 0 failed, huh? Then maybe we didn't add the correct type to load in the app delegate. It says this will need to ensure that the execution assembly is part of the app bundle, right? That should work, which means these are all tests, which means X should pick them up. Again, I know this works because I have repositories that have it. Don't know why it's not working right now, but that's candidly all it takes to set it up. Let's just try it and see if doing it at this layer works. I doubt that does anything different because there are no tests in that assembly, but there are definitely tests in this assembly. So oh well, that might be the problem. This might actually be my problem. So yeah, yep, that's what I thought. Yep, couldn't load that because that's a thing. So that's actually probably part of it. I should probably put an issue on there, or pull down the source and see if I can debug into why that does that thing. But let's just go ahead and remove these from here and put them at this level and see if the test runner actually picks them up, just so that I can have a sanity check before I head out. iOS test runner failed. App delegate. Oh. So smart. So let's do this. Let's just do view model fixture. Because that should always... Oh, it's internal. Internal's visible too. I don't feel like dealing with all that, so for the moment I'm going to just come back here, make this public, and make this sealed, just because, and we'll run it again. Okay, so now it's actually picking up the tests and it's telling me that it can't load testing or one of its dependencies. Okay, well, I guess this is a good stopping point. Hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully you got a chance to see where adding some simple tests to your view model to test the binding is a good thing. It's very easy to test view model state. View model state and state in general gets out of whack very easily in mobile applications. So writing unit testable code, writing code that can be tested, and actually testing those view models will save you a lot of headache when you're going against the binding engine, because it'll just give you a bit of sanity around the binding engine being the problem versus your code being the problem. Because I've had that happen before where the binding engine was actually my problem, and not having a unit test, I spent hours trying to solve and prove that it was the binding engine. And then when I found out that I could write unit tests, I was like, oh, well, then I can just test my state, and as long as my state is correct, the binding engine should handle it. And if it doesn't, then I can put a bug on Xamarin's list of things to do, and not worry about it being my problem, or maybe it's Reactive UI's problem, or maybe it's Prism's problem, or maybe it's a XAML issue. Who knows? But then at least I can verify that my unit of code is not the problem, which again is the whole point of unit testing, is to point out that units of code work correctly in isolation based upon pre-configured state. So that's pretty much all I've got for today. I'm glad you joined in. Hopefully you learned something, and hopefully you will go off and start testing your view model state to make sure that the Xamarin.Forms binding engine is doing what it's supposed to do. Because if your state is correct and the binding doesn't come out, then it's somewhere between the view model and the binding engine versus, hey, it could be anywhere along that stream. And the only way that I can test it is to run my application, go 3 navigations deep, and then hit this error, and then I find it. It's like I can find it with a much smaller feedback loop by just testing the view model state with XUnit, NUnit, and Fluent assertions. So that's all I've got for tonight. Join me next time.